Hi, everyone. I'm Grant Marr. I'm a research analyst at TRC, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that I've helped with at TRC that we've done for some Bay Area jurisdictions. And we've been identifying best practices specifically for electrification technologies, which of course have their own unique challenges, but a lot of the best practices that we've identified apply to permitting and inspection more generally. On the next slide, I can get into a little bit of the history. There's a lot of text here, but these are the four different kind of phases of the work that we have done with Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy, with key outputs listed for each of those four projects that we've completed to help streamline permitting for other agencies. So on top, sort of a baseline assessment, reviewing published resources, and the key output there was comparing permit fees and application review timelines across jurisdictions. So some really interesting findings there I'll talk about. The second one, SVCE's phase one, kind of reviewing permitting practices at various building departments, interviewing building departments with an output of a best practices guide. That was followed up by the third one you see in blue, phase two, which was to update that more recently with additional interviews, with some more specific key outputs. So permitting processes successes, as well as more specific recommendations. We also did some contractor interviews with an output there being also best practices from a different perspective and sort of a wish list from contractors. On the next slide, kind of a summary of the goals overall have been to identify opportunities and barriers with the permitting process and to inform streamlining efforts and opportunities to support jurisdictions. So this, I mentioned this has been electrification focused. So that's heat pump water heating and space heating, solar PV, EV charging is included as well, battery storage systems, and some, et cetera, more lesser seen kind of electrification permits, panel upgrades, things like that. That's not lesser seen, but some other, et cetera, in there. So, and another goal has been to assess and analyze permitting and inspection processes in each jurisdiction. So every jurisdiction, of course, as you know, has its own unique successes and opportunities. And so on the next slide, I can actually show you a little bit of what we found in terms of a baseline for these jurisdictions. This is just a few of the findings. Specifically, we looked at fees and timelines for electrification permits, as well as natural gas appliances. And so on the graph on the right, you'll see each kind of clump of 5 lines is one jurisdiction. So the first 5 lines is the first jurisdiction, the next 5 are the next jurisdiction. And so you'll see there's a lot of variation. They vary a lot. They typically are based on cost recovery, we found, but it depends on the permit type and local conditions. And application review timelines varied a whole lot, some online in some jurisdictions, and up to 20 business days for some of these in others. You can see if you look closely at the text is a little small in the graph, but fees range anywhere from close to 50 all the way up to more than 350 for the same kinds of permits. So definitely a lot of variation. On the next slide, I can talk a little bit about the phase one sort of best practices recommendations that came out of our work with SVCE. This is a lot of info here, and I don't have time to go through every single recommendation in detail, but the report can be found on this link on the SVCE website. And these are listed actually in order that we recommend should be done first, and then to those that should be generally done later, closer to number 10, but this also roughly happens to go from easier steps to harder steps. So starting with kind of just identifying an internal champion for streamlining, all the way down to 7 and 8, tracking the trends a little better, specific to electrification permits, separating those out from like-for-like gas changeouts. And then 9 and 10, seeing more specific web-based application systems and aligning processes with neighboring jurisdictions, maybe a little bit more effort there. And then, of course, some support recommendations, or some recommendations around third-party support for some jurisdictions has been best practice for many. On the next slide, so this is part of phase 2 that we did to dive a little deeper with specific jurisdictions rather than just best practices overall. These are successes reported by building officials. We talked to officials from 12 different agencies, so this is out of 12 agencies. How many of those 12 reported significant success in some of these areas? And so online permitting systems, some significant success at least was seen by 9 of those jurisdictions. Application guides and checklists, seven of them had at least some of the electrification technologies with functional guides and checklists. Same day over-the-counter review, about half. Implementing Solar App Plus, about 4 of the jurisdictions had already started their way toward implementing streamlined solar permitting. Online inspection requests, we saw a few successes there, and then virtual inspections, just a couple jurisdictions that we talked to offering fully virtual inspections for certain technologies. The next slide shows some support needs reported. So with those same jurisdictions, these are based again on interviews with building departments, and these are areas where agencies would appreciate more support. And as you can see, again, each jurisdiction has its own needs, which is why for 3C REN, we're focusing on really specific tailored needs assessments. I'll talk more about that later on today, but this shows you a little bit about what we found for these jurisdictions. All 12 of the agencies reported that it would at least be partially helpful to get some updates to those customer resources. And for some, it would be creating completely new customer resources to guide applicants through the process. Additional training, of course, helpful for many of them. Updates to online systems that can obviously be super variable depending on each jurisdiction can need all kinds of different updates, some really big revamping and some more specific tweaks to make things more streamlined. The next, on the 4th line, you'll see that 4 of the agencies actually reported that they have significant problems with the first inspection being failed, especially for certain electrification technologies, PV and batteries, especially for some. And so we outlined some recommendations for some ideas of maybe how different applicants can submit corrections before that first inspection. And then some consolidation of multi-department reviews for a couple and adding third-party review just for one jurisdiction, so that might be helpful. And so we also, I mentioned, we interviewed contractors, and we got a few. These are just the main points of what contractors reporting is working especially well with permitting processes for electrification. Online application portals, of course, saves time, instant permits and specific timelines or status updates, and being able to pay fees online were all mentioned as being helpful. For combined MEP or dedicated electrification applications, this was interesting because it wasn't mentioned so much in the successes from the building officials that we talked to, but contractors mentioned that this really simplifies the process for electrification retrofits. It helps distinguish them from like-for-like replacements. A clear, consistent, fast application review, I mean, that's kind of obvious, but especially was mentioned that it helps contractors understand and correct errors, prevents delays on projects, and short time windows for inspection appointments. For real-time updates, of course, helps contractors plan their time appropriately, prevents wasted time on site waiting for inspectors. So those are things that contractors mentioned have already been working really well. And we also asked for sort of a wish list. These are some common wish list items. Consistent reviewers or inspectors for each project. This was mentioned that for many, this helps build trust and rapport with contractors. Prevents conflicting corrections, which contractors reported having seen, or repeat reviews or inspections. The second one here, access to speaking to reviewers or inspectors. So preventing mistakes before review or inspection, and helps confirm understanding in the interpretation there and clarify comments. A streamlined and transparent process, of course, increases opportunities. Increasing the opportunities for online instant permits was mentioned. And several contractors mentioned, limiting plan review if possible just to building safety or code violations rather than other more minor details or issues. And some other wish list items on the next slide. So those were the process kind of wish list items. Contractors also named some wish list items around inspection specifically. So reducing inspection lead times, shorter inspection appointment windows, real-time arrival updates. These all make sense, but we synthesize these into the top wish list items around inspections named by contractors. One interview comment here: with online portals, some jurisdictions are able to provide a 2-hour appointment window for inspections. So just a data point there. And one last wish list slide here from contractors. And of course, many of these line up with our sort of best practices in speaking to building officials. But from contractors' perspective, permit fees, having a clear and streamlined fee schedule, and then reduced cost for electrification permits would be on their wish list. Application resources, step-by-step application guides, clear and concise permit checklists and document requirements, and clear and concise inspection checklists all made the list. This is obviously a quick overview of a long list of nuanced findings from a lot of different projects. But a little later, I can go into a little more detail about the work we're excited to do with 3C Ren. And hopefully this quick overview is helpful.
Thanks a lot, Grant. I'm wondering if there's questions on any of that, or if anybody wants to spend a minute or two on some key questions there. That was interesting. You can raise your hand, I'll see you, or you can also just speak up at this point too, if you... Nope, okay. Yeah, I was intrigued by seeing like some of the items you had on that were not dissimilar from what our panelists said. This idea, like the customer resources and that additional training, those are things that, kind of came out of our conversation earlier. And some of the instantaneous, wanting to get things faster and more streamlined. And it was interesting. Ian was talking about like, yeah, there is streamlining, but there are things we have to do. So there is going to be this ongoing push and pull between the contractors and the permitting offices, and how that actually happens down the road. So really, really appreciate that. So I think the next step we really wanted to go into is like, how can 3C Ren help? Let's see, Gray, are you taking this, or is this?
Yeah, that'll be me.
All right. How can 3C Ren help?
Yeah, so we're really interested in taking these awesome points and learning opportunities from our speakers and from the information that Grant just shared, and seeing what are methods that 3C Ren can actually help to accomplish some of these goals. So what we're going to do now is we have compiled a few different proposals for methods that 3C Ren might be able to help. And then after we present on that and do a bit of a recap, we'll go into breakout groups, and we'll actually be soliciting some feedback on each of these proposals and creating opportunities for you all to give us suggestions on ways that we could be of service in supporting streamlined permitting in our region. So the first proposal is one that's pretty straightforward. It's about discount fees for energy-friendly permits. So we just saw on that last slide from Grant about a wish list item of make it more affordable to do electrification permits. And so we looked at a case study from the city of St. Helena, and they have an energy-friendly permit sale program. So the city itself is not too dissimilar from some that we have in the Tri-County region. They have about 5,500 population. It's high density. They have a lot of owner-occupied housing. And what they have done is they've offered 75% off of permit fees for energy saving permits, including solar PV, EV charging, heat pump heating and cooling, window and door replacements, and gray water systems. And they did this in order to incentivize building owners to consider more efficient and climate-friendly systems. So kind of looking at that example, we are thinking that 3C Ren would be able to offer or match funds for homeowners, contractors, or building departments. And essentially, we can be the party that helps to discount the fees for energy-friendly permits without necessarily making our building departments lose the potential income that comes with permits. So there'll be opportunities to ask questions and discuss more and make suggestions on this in a little bit. Our second proposal is centered more around professional support for plan checking. We understand that Title 24 compliance comes with a lot of modeling and complex topics that your average plans examiner might not necessarily be trained or educated in. So we have two kind of different proposals here that include different levels of support. One would be through our Reach Code program, using our connections with jurisdictions and our experience helping them to write and pass policy that supports energy efficiency, and exploring the idea of requiring CEAs to sign off on Title 24 compliance forms. And so the idea behind this is that permit staff doesn't have to spend as much time on review, and there can be a higher level of confidence that the plans that they're reviewing are in compliance because it's been signed off by a certified energy analyst. The other, a little more pulled back approach is we have this sample energy feature summary that could potentially be integrated into plan review. And it's this spreadsheet that has all of the different energy features that a plan checker is going to want to look at and check off as they're going through their plan review process. And then I wanted to note that we do have an existing resource for our building departments, what to check on a CF1R. We'll be sending out these slides after the forum, and you'll be able to access that link, but it's also on our website on our 3cren.org/codes page. Proposal 3 is relatively straightforward for those jurisdictions in our region that haven't yet moved to any kind of online or e-permitting model. We had a few different ideas. One being to develop an options for online permit software guide that can take the considerations of our jurisdictions into mind and outline some potential softwares they could explore, listing out all the relevant information. Other offerings in this vein include offering technical support and training to help people transition from paper to e-permitting. And another includes providing funds for departments that might be limited in their capacity or funding to actually access software that would be beneficial for them. And then finally is less of a proposal and more of an ask. And for this, I'll tag Grant to come back and explain a little bit about this partnership that 3CREN and TRC have for some research on permitting in our region.
Thanks, Grace. So yeah, we're taking our research process done for other jurisdictions that I talked about and aiming for 3CREN to focus on really specific tailored needs assessments to hopefully identify specific pathways toward meeting those needs. So this builds on previous research findings and the best practices I laid out, and also kind of recognizes the unique needs of conditions for each jurisdiction. The goal here is to align the 3CREN municipal support opportunities with whatever the needs of the jurisdictions are. And then resulting in a needs assessment, jurisdiction-specific needs assessments to inform those next steps. So potentially that could be opportunities for direct funding or incentives. We could identify sample scopes of work for future RFPs, and again, specific to each jurisdiction. Another slide. So the scope of this would be limited to just a sample of 6 jurisdictions intended to reflect a variety of conditions in the 3CREN territory. So we're looking for participation from 6 different kinds of jurisdictions in several ways. This would be a literature review we would conduct, looking at documents and resources as well as permit data. And we would do interviews similar to how I described the other projects. We would interview about permitting processes and then what the challenges and support needs are specific to each jurisdiction. We'll interview contractors as well for a different perspective about their experiences with permitting and with inspections, and find out about best practices and challenges from their perspective. And so if you're interested in participating, I would ask, please contact Gray at the email address listed, and we'll be selecting jurisdictions to work with us on this project really soon.
Thank you, Grant. And a note that we'll have some opportunities to see if there's interest in y'all informing the research that we're doing and being able to have some input on the questions that we're asking and figure out what you all would like to know and learn from this process as well.
So, great, just given our size, I think we could actually just do everything right here in this group and not break out. We have a nice little group here and have that conversation. So, I think what we're hearing is sort of all these interesting elements, which is we have jurisdictions transitioning over to this e-permitting, which is helping. It's creating some opportunities, as Sylvia really put it. We don't have to, drive back and forth. We don't have to have all these gigantic rolls of paper. You didn't even mention all the storage that it takes to have all those things in terms of physical storage, which is also a big deal. But there's also these other concerns from contractors, from homeowners, the costs, the complexity continues to get harder and harder. So really here, we're trying to think about one, how do we increase the take up of these permits? How do we make it easier? What are the things we can do? So maybe instead of jumping into breakouts, why don't we just go ahead and we can go through this process and look at each one of these proposals and talk a little bit about that. So Gray, do you want to lead us through this, or do you want I can start us off? Or
yeah, I mean, I think that the first question we had is just if there's any of these proposals that are of supreme interest to people that we might want to tackle first. We don't have to go in this order. So if anything you see here is inspiring, or you're eager to ask a question or start a conversation, now would be the time to bump that one up to the top. I know they're all so exciting.
I'll jump in. I mean, I think of the three proposals, the one that I think could probably be the most advantageous, especially for our customers, is the proposal one of the discounted fees for the energy friendly permits. I think people love a good discount. I think of all the couponers at the store the same way. Ian brought up that probably 90% of new FAU changeouts aren't permitted. So if you can suddenly there's advertisement that we have discounted permits on sale for to encourage these type of energy efficient appliances to be installed, I think that would probably have its a very good outreach and benefit for the public.
That's great. How would you, and Gray or anybody else from through CRN, how would this actually go forward? What would you actually do on this? I know you had a proposal on this, but maybe since we brought this up, we can talk a little bit more deeper about that.
Yeah, I mean, we had some questions for the group about what this would potentially look like. And I just want to make sure before we go on, Sarah or Ian, can we make sure that someone is taking notes on our answers?
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so when it comes to the first proposal, some of our questions were, first, how much does it cost in our region to do electrification permitting? I know I heard earlier something along the lines of like $130, but it would be great to get a better sense of what some of these permits actually cost.
Could I tack on to that question?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering who often ends up paying, particularly when you have a contractor scenario, just because I'm not as familiar. Does that get passed through often? Is it even advertised as an extra cost? Because we were talking earlier about, sticker shock, perhaps, even if there isn't actually that high of a price, people think there's a lot of zeros. So I'm wondering kind of how customers perceive the sticker as well as what the stickers actually are.
Anybody want to add to that? So I know that, let's see, Sylvia or Ian, because I think Tim told us the 130, if I was correct. What is the general cost of something like a e-permit for a electric? I think what you said was a HVAC system or a hot water heater.
I was looking into that right now.
Yeah.
I've got my fee schedule up also. It's at the highest end for a pretty significant, HVAC system. You're looking at about $325. For your typical residential mechanical unit, you're looking at about $90. So it's somewhere between $100 and $300 total per project for a limited scope. Now, certainly a single family dwelling ground up, you could be looking at $60,000 to $80,000 worth of fees for a single family home, and most of that is driven by your impact fees for infrastructure improvement, street improvement, school fees, etc. But of that 60 to 80,000, usually about 20 to 30 is in actual plan review and permitting costs. Side a little off topic, but just to give a range, you're typically looking at about $100 to $300 at the very highest for a project of this scope.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
I'm looking for the water heater, just the cost of that, the fee amount for a water heater is $242 from our fee schedule. But I know there's a technology fee that gets tacked on, so that would be I would say like $250, $275 to that. And like for a water pump, it would be $300 plus technology fee. It would be $230 probably, or $245, something like that.
Does
That's
that
my
help
best
you out,
guess.
Brandon? Does that give you a sense, Brandon, of where how it flies? So 3C, do you want to go and then say how 3C Ren might do the permit sale, what that might look like? Or what at least some of the thoughts about it? And
Yeah, I mean, 3C Ren is experienced in offering incentives and rebates for electrification projects, especially in a resident-facing capacity. So there is, a potential pathway where this is a direct rebate or incentive for the homeowner, where they pay the fee and get reimbursed. There's also avenues that we take to work with contractors if they're doing, the permit filing fees and all of that. And then there's potentially another option of actually working directly with our building departments and figuring out a billing schedule for like monthly permits and costs. But I think a question that we have is from the building department standpoint, what would be reasonable or compelling to your customers and also helpful for your staff?
I think the way that the fees are created, we just did our recent fee study and revised our fee schedule. It really is cost recovery as a jurisdiction. I can't make money off of this. In fact, a well-run jurisdiction is almost seen better if they lose money. When we compiled our fees in total, we assigned a time frame to each of the individuals associated with the process. So if it was 15 minutes for the permit tech, 30 minutes for the plan reviewer, 20 minutes for the inspector, that's how we generate the cost of these permits. At no time should we, take in additional funds beyond that. As Sylvia mentioned, there's a significant number of state mandated fees that are also associated with these. There's a percentage that goes towards disabled access, strong motion implementation for seismic review, green fees that we pay to the state on a percentage basis. So really, from what I see, it would be the jurisdiction being educated on the requirements and the programs that are that can qualify for this type of assistance, and identifying it for the applicant, and then maybe steering them back to the 3C Ren process of, hey, I've noticed that you're proposing an electrification project. I understand there's projects in place for this. Please, submit an application through 3C Ren to see whether or not this is something they can help you with. Because unfortunately, it's very difficult for me without council involvement and community involvement to reduce the fees itself, because the residents view it as you're subsidizing a project for your neighbor, essentially. And as a jurisdiction, that's difficult for us to do as far as changing the fees overall. So really, it is steering them back through the 3C Ren process and then receiving the assistance directly to the applicant prior to submittal.
Ian, just curious, and if this would kind of be a workaround in terms of rates, is that there wouldn't be necessarily reduction of rates, but a percentage decrease for the customer, even a waiver, if 3C Ren, our codes and standards program, were to provide kind of an award and a not to exceed amount of, X number of dollars. And once you hit that number of permits for a specific type of measures, let's use heat pump water heaters as an example. Once that level is hit in terms of a dollar amount, then the sale is done. We've hit this many installs or permits that people purchased and successfully went through, and then we can kind of report out on it. Would that be a there's no real loss to the city per se. There's no favoritism or changes to the rate necessarily either. It's just being something that's kind of an award that's provided to the city to kind of pursue.
I'd have to discuss with my finance folks. Certainly, I'm not the expert in fee collection and distribution. You'd be amazed at the number of accounts that are associated with any given permit. That $150 is split many ways. So I don't see an issue with it overall. It's similar to our approach with some of our disabled access fees, where we draw a percentage based on the permit total. And then there's a reporting function where we actually provide a form back to the state at the end of the year showing where those funds were used, what trainings were completed. Usually there's a percentage of a retainer where you retain, X amount percent for processing or for administrative fees associated with it. But yeah, eventually you justify where that money actually went. Because of the small volume that I'm seeing, not just in electrification, but comparatively with the county and with the city of Ventura, certainly, I'm looking at 60 to 70 permits a month. Whereas when I was in Ventura, we were issuing about 1,000 permits a month. So just based on percentage, the number of heat pump water heaters out of that 70 at the moment is 0.00 something percent. So that's why my first inkling would be to move them in your direction, apply for that assistance beforehand, and then pursue the process, just so that you're not dropping a check off that I just returned to you in 6 months. I just see that as a simpler approach overall. But I'm certainly open to whatever program we can implement as a community.
Any thoughts from Tim or Sylvia? Or any other, I don't know if we have other building departments here.
For county, it would all be our invoicing and finance is a little very strict, to be honest. And they're very specific on how we do permitting and how we charge them. So it would be not to say that it can't be done, because we've done it with I remember with Los Osos Sewer, when they were connecting, there was a kind of like almost like a grant, and then the fees were waived. So I know there's a way to do it, but it would be something that finance would need to get would need to buy into, and then it would need to be programmed somehow into our system. I don't know if for a set amount of time, maybe, and I mean that's what and see how many we get in average for a year. Maybe that might be a possibility. But to be honest, the easiest way would be for it to come from our customers, and the customers then get reimbursed through you guys, so that our system stays the same. We don't have a change in business process, because anytime we change business processes, our finance and staff do not like that. So that would be the easiest thing for us.
And to add to Sylvia's comment, reimbursement in many ways for a jurisdiction is the ticket, because it ensures that they actually completed the project as proposed. If we simply subsidize the permit application fee, not that there's anyone not above board in the construction industry, but we may find a number of applications that never actually come to fruition, despite the fact that they cashed the check and kept on moving.
Should we move to the other proposal, Gray? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the professional support that we can offer to plan checkers. So the two proposals that I mentioned included a requirement or incentive for CEAs to sign off on Title 24 compliance forms. And then the second is integrating an energy feature summary into plan review that could streamline the ability to verify that energy features were checked. And so one question that we have is, first, what level of familiarity does your staff have with issuing permits for heat pumps or other similar electric appliances? I heard Ian say earlier that it's a 0.00 something % rate of permits going to those types of projects. And so, you know, that leads me to believe that we have probably some degree of variability across the region, but in some places, very, very little experience, and maybe not all staff has experience.
That I would agree with you on that.
And I can speak to that to a point. The lack of volume certainly, you know, doesn't help us to fine tune the process overall. But again, I view an application as similar to an application for a gas-fired appliance, although, you know, we're certainly looking to encourage the installation. From a permit processing standpoint, they really vary, you know, very little. It's still an application, it's still a fee. We didn't create a special process for heat pump water heaters, but you know, I'm going to charge you a water heater fee, which is actually pretty minimal. It's based on the inspection time. We're not doing a plan review on it, so there's no fee generated through plan check. It's really just to process the permit and issue it itself. So it's certainly more education, the better. Happy to take on any education that you guys are willing to send my way. And you know, I do use the Energy Code Coach system when needed. We do get the Title 24 documents on the plan set. I do review. I even look at the azimuth and which direction the property is facing, which I hear is actually not the norm. But we do review the energy component pretty extensively prior to issuance. With a small jurisdiction, we also use a lot of outside contract plan checks. So we've got, you know, pretty large entities that are completing these reviews, and they may have in-house training opportunities as well. But yeah, certainly happy to take any help available.
Yeah, that kind of points out the difference in the two approaches here is that one, you know, with integrating energy feature summary, that would come with, you know, some training and internal dialogue conversation with 3CRN. But then the other is more having like an energy professional similar to like a HERS rater be involved in the process and take some of the administrative burden off of the permitting staff to run those energy compliance models, make sure that they are all sound before it even gets to the plan checker. So I guess the question here is, what's preferable? Is it internal staff training with like some paper, like physical document resources, or would it be outsourcing entirely to a certified energy analyst?
I'd say internal training. The ultimately, I'm going to have to stamp this plan set approved. So the acceptance of this third-party documentation is going to depend on my comfort level and my interpretation of the code. It's like, to a point, stating that because the design was completed by a registered licensed engineer, then I don't have to look at the structural system. I still do a complete structural review, despite the fact that this design professional, this, you know, well-educated professional has completed their review, because ultimately it is in their best interest to get this project passed. And I try to mention as much as possible, especially in the inspection end and also on plan check, it's always in addition to and never in lieu of. I require, and the state requires through our building code, that the structural engineer goes out and does an observation of the project, that you hire a special inspector to go out and do an inspection of the structural systems. At no point does that mean that the inspector from the city then does not have to go out and also do his review, because ultimately it's a partnership. So although it would certainly add to my comfort level of review to have this professional, this expert to provide their interpretation, I still have to provide my own.
Jordan?
Just a quick comment, or I guess a question to everyone on the call. Back in the day, KBEC used to offer what was called the Certified Energy Plans Examiner cert certification. That has since gone away since I believe 2013. If 3C Ren were to either reinvigorate or create a certification that would kind of wrangle all of the energy components that was updatable every 3 years along with the code cycle, would that be of interest to folks, given that it's a plans examination or an internal conversation like you suggested, Ian? You still have to stamp off on those plans. Yeah, I'm seeing heads nodding.
I think that's a great idea, Jordan.
Okay.
Great. So do we want to look at that last one? I think maybe there's two more. So then next one is just looking at the time.
Yeah, I think that we can probably skip proposal 3 for now. I think we're going to collect more relevant information in our research, which does bring me to that final ask, which is participation in our permitting study that we're doing with TRC. And so I am just going to share a link in the chat to kind of the draft survey questions that we have developed so far. And either now or in follow-up, when everybody gets, your slides and recording and everything, we'd love to know what questions you have if we're doing research about permitting across the Tri-County, what our department needs are. We want to know what questions we can include that would be beneficial for our actual building department staff. So feel free to take a minute or two to just glance at the questions that we have there. It's not comprehensive by any means, but to get an idea of what we're going to start to ask.
Okay, great. And then so what is the time commitment, do you think, Gray or maybe Grant, on this, sort of like just so that folks can understand what they're getting into if they say, yay, this sounds good, and what's in it for them to participate? Maybe Grant, do you have a thought on that?
I was going to see if Gray had an answer to it. I'm pulling up the kind of timeline here. Do you know offhand, Grant? Offhand right now, Gray? Or
not off the top of my head. I mean, effectively, this is our launching point for this research process, so we're taking feedback.
Yeah, that was my sense as well. As I think it'll kind of depend on feedback and availability.
Yeah, okay. I guess the question is like, what is a reasonable amount of time to make to help us get a high response rate? Like, what are good avenues to make this ask to building departments? And what are reasonable constraints for asking like a permit staffer to respond to a survey?
And I'll say for our other studies, I mean, I think for looking at the data itself, permitting data, going more discreetly into, electrification technology fees, and I think it depends on how deep we're asking the questions, but I think, I think all of you probably have a better sense than I do of, for your specific jurisdiction, how long it would take to look up all the fees for 6 or 10 different technologies, how long it would take to look up what are common errors in those technologies. Some jurisdictions have that easily accessible and some don't. And when we're talking about the interviews, I mean, an hour-long interview, you can get a whole lot of information in just an hour in terms of what are the challenges and what are the successes so far. And I think if we want to dive deeper into that, which we're hoping to in this process, because then we can really provide some tailored recommendations specific to each jurisdiction, then maybe an hour, maybe a little more than an hour would actually help us to dive deeper. But yeah, I think it'll depend on availability and what actually seems like it'll be helpful.
Great, thank you. So lots of good stuff offering from 3C Ren. So let's turn it over to Jordan to finish this up here and tell us what's on the horizon.
Certainly. Gray, are you able to pull up the slides? Thank you. So I recognize I'm the one keeping you from happy hour, including my own. So I'll make this brief, but just want to thank everybody for attending. This has been really informative and helpful for us, as well as since we're starting to build programs and look into 2024 for potential offerings, not only for codes and standards, but what I'm going to talk about next that's coming up on the horizon. So, thanks, Gray. Just a quick, and this is really to kind of share our map and what RENs and how they're spreading out as of late. So didn't want to go into a deep dive into the history, but 2013, Bay Ren and SoCal Ren were started. Those are highlighted here in yellow and purple. In 2017, 3C Ren were approved here in blue to start administering programs. And then in 2021, the IREN was developed, which stands for Inland Regional Energy Network. So Santa Barbara and Riverside counties. And then lastly, a new REN called Rural REN is starting here in 2024, of which the County of San Luis Obispo is also a part of. Take advantage of some new programs, and we'll get into that here momentarily. So next slide, Greg. Here's our mission and vision for 3C REN. We really want to create a sustainable and equitable and economically vibrant Central Coast for all. And really trying to support local climate goals through the delivery of energy savings programs that empower a sustainable local economy and reduce social disparities in the Central Coast. Next slide, please. So you all are, I would imagine, somewhat familiar with our existing programs. We have our codes and standards program called Energy Code Connect, which is who's putting on this forum here today. We have a workforce education and training program called Building Performance Training. And then we have a home energy savings program, which is our residential direct install program, which is split between single family and multifamily. To offer retrofit incentives and rebates for those types of properties. However, we have new programs that we applied for way back in 2022 that were recently approved just a month ago by the California Public Utilities Commission. So really exciting news. We're effectively doubling the amount of programs and as well as our dollars coming from ratepayer funds to offer new programs in new sectors across the Tri-County region. Those include an agriculture technical assistance program, a commercial marketplace program to support local small and medium hard to reach customers. And I believe it's less than 10 employees is accurate. And then an energy assurance services program that will look to identify key community and public facing facilities for future weather events and pandemics, providing resiliency efforts and really hone in on how to keep those buildings up and running in the event of an emergency or another pandemic. Hopefully, we don't have to see one of those again for a while. And then lastly, for Rural REN, we're really excited to share that we'll be through participating with them, we'll be covering all of the sectors that are available under the portfolio through the California Public Utilities Commission, which includes financing. Which will provide bridge loans and micro loans at 0% for on-bill financing and small to large projects. So that will kind of work as kind of like a revolving energy loan fund for customers across the county of San Luis Obispo. So we'll have more information on that in 2024. And then also, we will be replicating the energy code, or I should say our codes and standards program that we built through 3C REN here, and move it across the Rural REN territory, where we'll be helping implement that program territory-wide, which is also very exciting. So if anybody's joining from outside in our rural territory, if you're your county was listed in or shown in the map at the beginning of these slides, you'll be able to take advantage more of our services through the Codes and Standards program, which is really exciting. Yeah, so I'll stop there and just say thank you again for everybody joining us today. It was really great, and thank you again to Ian, Tim, and Sylvia for being our fearless panel members. It's always great to have you guys with us, and also thanks to Gray and Mindy for all the great planning effort on this forum. It's been a good one. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you all.
muted,
It's been a
Mindy.
pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, I think we will end it there and thank everybody. We can stick around for a couple more minutes if anybody has some additional thoughts or questions. But other than that, we thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you. I'm gonna guess there's no questions.
All right.
I think we did a great job, huh?
Fair enough. And Gray, I'll be reaching out. It's I'm interested in doing some interviews. So we'll there's only a few of us, but we'll give whatever input we can.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Ian.
Great. Thank you guys.
Bye all.